Yes. Oh, and it just started recording. Yeah, I'm recording on my end, so okay. That wasn't true. So I guess we're good.
So I'm gonna...
You are in session 2C, the Skillshare Communities Building Mobile Seed Libraries as a Response to Disaster. We welcome you here to this space today. Next slide, please.
Hola a todos, bienvenidos a la sesión 2C, intercambio de saberes, comunidades formando bibliotecas móviles de semillas como respuesta al desastre. ¿Y qué hago ahora? Próxima diapositiva.
Yeah, I can still hear you on the English channel.
Sí, me puedes escuchar porque I'm in the main room yet. Is it okay if I just do the quick announcement of how people can access interpretation, and then we can just start the meeting right away?
Okay. So for you all to know, this session is being recorded so that participants...
Excuse me, Daniela, I'm going to do an announcement now so people can access the interpretation. Hola a todos, bienvenidos, disculpen los problemas técnicos y gracias por su gracia mientras nos apoyan a crear espacios multilingües durante la cumbre de semillas. Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for your grace and your patience as we solve some technical issues so we can make this accessible in a multilingual space here in the Summit Library. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Yaya y hoy voy a estar interpretando junto a mi compañera Anaís y ambas somos practicantes de la justicia del lenguaje. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yaya, and I'm here with my co-interpreter, Anaís, and we will be supporting with providing Spanish interpretation for today's meeting. Trabajamos con un marco que se llama la justicia del lenguaje. La justicia del lenguaje incluye el compromiso y la presencia plena de todos para asegurarnos de que todos podamos participar en nuestros idiomas. Queremos reconocer todos los idiomas presentes aquí, en especial los idiomas de las personas indígenas de las tierras en las que estamos habitando. We work within a framework called language justice. Language justice includes a commitment to everyone's full presence and capacity to be in our spaces. We recognize all the languages present here today, and especially the languages of the indigenous peoples of the lands that we are on. Ahora voy a dar unas pequeñas instrucciones de cómo accesar la interpretación en español e inglés, ya que esto va a ser un encuentro bilingüe. So now I'm going to give a brief instructions of how to access interpretation in both Spanish and in English, because this is going to be a bilingual presentation. Para accesar los canales de interpretación, usted va a buscar en la parte de abajo de su pantalla, si está en una computadora, un símbolo de globo. Cuando usted seleccione ahí, va a poder entonces seleccionar tanto inglés como español. Si usted está conectándose desde su tableta o teléfono, usted va a buscar los 3 puntos o más, va a seleccionar ahí, seleccione interpretación de idiomas y luego seleccione su idioma. Importante que si está en tableta o teléfono, que tiene que darle a finalizar al final para poder accesar la interpretación. So to access interpretation, you're going to see on the bottom of your screen a little globe that says interpretation if you're on a computer. You're going to click on there and then you can choose your preferred language if you're not bilingual, either English or Spanish. And if you're joining from a tablet or phone, you can look for the 3 dots or more. You can select there, select language interpretation, and then you can select the language of your choosing. And it's important to note that if you're on a tablet or phone, to please click on done at the top part of the menu. Cualquier duda o pregunta, o si en algún momento no puede accesar la interpretación en su idioma, por favor envíenos un mensaje en la caja de chat y vamos a poder asistirle lo más rápido posible. So if you have any trouble accessing the interpretation or have any troubles once the interpretation starts, please be sure to text us, to chat us, and send us a message in the chat and we will assist you as soon as possible. Entonces, como practicantes de la justicia del lenguaje, tenemos unas cuantas pautas para asegurarnos que, pues, que todos seamos responsables de poder asegurarnos que todos tengan acceso a la información. Y estas son unas cuantas pautas que ustedes pueden hacer para apoyar. Por favor, hablemos a un ritmo moderado y tomemos pausas con frecuencia, especialmente entre hablantes, ideas, pensamientos u oraciones. Si en algún momento necesitemos que hablen a un ritmo más pausado, vamos a estar enviándoles un mensaje por la caja de chat, así que por favor esté pendiente. Otra de las recomendaciones es que por favor hable proyectando al micrófono y en voz alta. Si en algún momento tenemos algún problema con el audio, también le vamos a estar dejando saber a través de la caja de chat. Si eres una persona bilingüe, te recomendamos que por favor te puedes dejar la interpretación apagada o si vas a escoger un canal, por favor manténgase hablando en ese canal solamente. Y para las personas que accesan el español, van a haber notado que nosotros utilizamos, no utilizamos el masculino universal como tradicionalmente se hace, sino que estamos intentando de crear espacios inclusivos donde no hacemos asunciones de las personas o en base a su género. Así que va a escuchar que en vez de la tradicional A u O, vamos a utilizar la E o la X para pues nuevamente no asumir sobre el género. So just a few guidelines for creating multilingual spaces. We understand that it's everyone's responsibility, so this is what you could do to support. Please speak if you're going to speak at a moderate pace, and if we are having trouble with your speed, we're going to be please ask you to pay attention to the chat, because we're going to be letting you know that we need you to slow down. We also ask you to please speak at a projecting your voice to the mic and on a loud and clear voice, and if you're having problems with the audio, we will also let you know. As for people that access Spanish, you will hear that we are not using the universal masculine as an intentional effort to ungender language, and to not make assumptions about people's gender. So you will hear the E, instead of the A or O, you're going to hear the E or the X. Y una última pauta, por favor, mantenga su micrófono silenciado, ya que los ruidos de fondo pues hace un poquito más difícil interpretar. And the last reminder to please keep your mics off at all moments when someone is speaking, so we can avoid any background noises, which make it very hard for us to interpret. Esto concluye el anuncio de interpretación. Muchísimas gracias al Departamento de la Comida y a la Cumbre de las Semillas por asegurarse que este sea un espacio multilingüe y que sea el principio de muchas otras más. So thank you, Departamento de la Comida, and thank you to the Seed Summit organizers for making an effort for making this a multilingual space, and may this be the first seed of the many to come. Gracias por su atención, y esta puede oficialmente comenzar. Thank you for your attention, and this can officially begin.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jaya, for that great introduction and explanation to the interpretation of this session, this is the only session being held in a bilingual format, and it's a real honor to be a part of it. So just some notes before we start the actual process. Again, a reminder that the session is being recorded. Please turn off your video if you don't want that to be seen. The recording is for participants and will be made available to you through an email through Eventbrite. Also, we are asking to please fill out a survey form, and I will be giving you that link throughout the session to give us feedback so we can make the Seed Summit better next year. There will be speaker contact at the end of the presentation, and the presentation itself will also be made available to you. Next slide, please. Hola, Tara. Next slide, please. A reminder to please amplify our voices, let others know so that they can contribute and learn and participate and join us in this effort to preserve seeds, culture, and society. So here are some ways to follow the Seed Library movement and also the work that's being done here and described in this session. Next slide, please. Just to introduce myself, my name is Daniela Soleri. I'm the chat and general support person for this session. I'm speaking to you from Shmuish or Barbeño Chumash lands and waters on the central coast of what is now California. And if you are interested in learning more about the native lands where you are passing through or living, you can go to the following website and find that information there. So I think we're ready now to move on.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. It is with so much humility and respect and gratitude that I welcome everybody to this beautiful island of Borikén. I'm speaking to you with Tara from the mountains of Maricao. This is one of the most sacred places of the island in terms of the resistance of our people. And I want to put that front and center, that we are speaking from an occupied land known to most people as Borikén. We come from a movement, or rather many movements, where land is as sacred to us, as water is sacred to us, as seeds are as sacred to us as one another. We see ourselves as connected beings. And with that is with great love and honor that we welcome in some of our ancestral seeds, such as the habló, but also our many ancestors who've been working for freedom and sovereignty and peace for our people here and elsewhere.
Hi. Before we continue, I would like to just do an overview of what we're going to be.
Español.
Ay, en español. Más fácil.
Oh, in
Disculpe.
Spanish, that's better. I apologize. We are trying to create a space where we include our community that in their majority don't speak English, and I'm trying to navigate Spanish and English, but I will be speaking Spanish during the majority of the session. So before that, we wanted to share an overview of the session. Obviously, we have less than an hour. We are going to go over some community agreements and consent. We're going to go over the intentions that we both have, and we want to be present, and we want to know who we are referring to. And we want to talk about disasters or defining disasters in our communities, and also sharing a little bit about mobile seed libraries and what are the benefits, some challenges, and some emergent strategies, and some next steps. We could discuss it amongst all, and we know that we live in different places, but there's so much to learn amongst the models of mobile seed libraries, and at the end there'll be a closure. So some community agreements and consent, we're going to call them, better yet, intentions, are ours, Elena's and mine. We would like to honor the interpreters, and Elena is better at this than I, but I'm practicing. We're going to be speaking at a moderate pace, and we're doing this for our community, and our community is in Borikén and the Borikén diaspora. And yes, we do have a lot of allies around the world. That's why we are practicing what's something completely new for us, which is having interpretation. We would also like to let everyone know that we're honoring our ancestors and our movement ancestors, being from the agroecological movement, from the queer movement, for the movement for the decolonization of Puerto Rico. And they are the ones that are guiding us in our relationship with the land. And we're all here because we understand that we are part of a bigger movement for sovereignty, seed sovereignty, and food sovereignty. And we want to thank all of the practices and way of life of our ancestors and indigenous folk that have been able to pass down all these ways of living that we nowadays share. We're not here to teach about colonial seed systems. We're here in decolonial practice, decolonial seed practices that are shared by our communities. They're not sold, they're not patented. And yes, we would like to let everyone know that during the day, we are sorry that unfortunately we're not able to be in conversation due to the technical issues of us being able to record these sessions in Spanish for our community, since this session is going to be a shared resource that's going to live in our agrotech or agroteca, our agro library. So thank you very much. I'm going to take my presentation off screen for a moment so we're able to introduce ourselves.
Hello, hello, hello. As we come to introduce ourselves, we welcome you to please introduce yourselves, the Indigenous land where you are now, where you come from, and perhaps a seed or a fruit you want to bring into the space. It is with my great, great pleasure that I am able to introduce Tara Rodriguez Besosa. I came to know Tara long before they came to know me, and that was largely through the internet. Tara, among many things, is a whiz at social media and communications. But really what I want to share about Tara is the incredible work that they have done on this island for food and seed sovereignty since 2011 specifically. It was at that time that they found themselves in the work of supporting a local food system. And I think it's important to note that among the many ways in which Tara has stepped up to create spaces for healing, nutritious foods that our people enjoy, that are nourishing for our island, is that they have worked doing community supported agriculture. They have also worked running a restaurant and forming Departamento de la Comida, which means the Department of Food, precisely because on this island, in this colony, there isn't such a department. There's bureaucracies for many, many things, but one thing we definitely lack is food security, and that has been, or food sovereignty, and that has been at the cornerstone of their work. There's many other lovely things that I could share, but something we're growing into. This is our first time presenting together, but it's also, we spend much time together on their farm, which is what you're seeing on the screen right now. This is a beautiful image from Tara's patio. And it is here that we're putting in a living food forest to create dreams and futures for our people. There's more to say, but I will turn it over to Tara.
Gracias, Elena. Voy a ser un poco más casual.
Thank you, Elena. And I'm going to be a little bit more casual about this because everything that they said, I could be even 10 more minutes presenting and talking about Elena. But I would like to simply speak about a person that has been a guide, a spiritual guide for me, a person that has been a sister amongst seeds. And a lot of what I have been practicing with seeds became a reality. thanks to this person that from their balcony, from a public housing from Cabo Rojo, Puerto Rico, has been able to give life to over 50 or 60 native trees that nowadays are in Otra Cosa, our farm, which is the little piece of land where I live and I share with our community. We've been planting trees this past year. They're 4 or 5 feet tall, and they're going to take a lot of years. It's going to take a lot of years for them to grow, and she planted them from seed. So I would like to share what has been a beautiful friendship, but also an eye-opening of what can be possible, and that you don't have to have a piece of land, a farm, to be a seed guardian, and that you don't have to have a farm for you to be a person that plants trees. And that's something that I think it's important when we talk about community seeds. And I could say so many things about Elena, but let's continue. So we wanted to get into what is disaster. And Daniela will be sharing through the chat. It's a total of 4 questions for today's session. All of these questions is for us to have collectively created information amongst all of us about what is a truly effective model of mobile library seats, mobile community library seats, especially the climate crisis that we're facing, but also other disasters that we're facing. So those that can't, if you're able to, share through the chat what's a disaster for a community, or what does a disaster mean to my community when we're talking about seeds or about food sovereignty. We wrote down some things that for us make part of that disaster. For example, when we talk about the colonial context, what's the colonial context in Borikén? The majority of our public services have been privatized. Our schools have been closed down, or they've been closing down little by little by an austerity measure that has been imposed by a fiscal board. And we're in the middle of huge protests at an individual level, at a personal home level, and at a collective level, because we're seeing the privatization of our energetic system. And some people think that it would lead to the privatization of the waters in Puerto Rico. Talking about what access would be in Puerto Rico, there are no libraries. Basically, there's hardly any libraries around, and the majority of the libraries that do exist are community or home libraries. So the work to create a seed library needs to be done outside of the context that there's a library that can house this seed library, and there's people that live in an empire, and there's people that live in a colony. We do not have a massive transportation system that is adequate. We have many ways where the trees and seeds are less mobile due to our lack of access to transportation. When we talk about our food system within the global context, there's a lot of hunger and also a lot of diseases that are caused by our diets in Borikén. And particularly, it's been said that we import more than 85% of the food that we consume in Puerto Rico. When you import that amount of food, and when the average of time that the food takes to get to our tables is in between 1 or 2 weeks, you can imagine that the food that does reach our tables are pretty processed and are not very fresh. So we have a huge need in Puerto Rico in order to be able to access fresh crops. And our diet depends more on meat, importation, and a lot of things that we're not able to grow here. And that's something that also affects our communities, our seed communities, because if I don't have access to fresh crops, I don't have access to seeds. And that's something that we many times forget when we talk about food sovereignty. Also, when we talk about storing and mobility, I mentioned transportation and the fact that having a car here, being able to drive it, gas, is very costly. We also have problems with the storage of our crops since we are in a space that can be very hot during the day. And we live in an archipelago where crops die fast. So being able to store or storage is very important. And I'm not sure if you know, but Puerto Rico is the third producer of GMO seeds in the United States, or genetically modified seeds. Monsanto, and that's known today as Bayer, is one of the companies that receives more subsidies by the government and that has most land at their disposition.
Lastly, we have obviously our teachers and our elders, the people that have guided us. A lot of them that nowadays do not have the adequate support. More than 25% of the population in Puerto Rico, and this is increasing, it's an elder. And we are finding that they do not have the needed support. And so they are not we are not able to learn enough from our elders. And obviously, lastly, within our disaster definition are the like climate crises and disasters like hurricanes, floodings, earthquakes. Even though that in Puerto Rico, it is we say that those are not catastrophes. It's more catastrophic how the government and the people have responded to this things that are happening due to climate change. And so now I'm going to share the next slide that Elena's gonna have.
Gracias, gracias. Sorry. Thank you, Tara. This is really such a big and beautiful pleasure to have this conversation bilingually. And I just want to say that again, because one of the main themes that brings us together in addition to decolonization is rematriation. So for us, that's really a way of finding our way home, healing the soul wounds that we as a people carry, specifically from being an invaded island that remains colonized, an island where slavery, was and remains such a wound for our people. And so for us, rematriation is a way of returning to the ways of our ancestors, their life ways, but also their ways of knowing and changing them for the way that we need to live now. As transfeminists, as people that are really engaged in social justice work that is across the board, not solely focused on seeds, but on the whole way in which we live in the world. And with that, we really want to give our honor to women, Native women specifically, Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee women who have led the way in creating a movement around seed rematriation in particular, which is a way of taking the seeds that have been meaningful to sustaining our lands and our waters and our people over many, many generations, but are often no longer here. Or if they are here, they've been genetically modified or altered in some ways through the chemical pollution that we experience here. with that, I want to say that for us, decolonization is really something that we feel in our skin. It is deeply connected to our ancestors, but it's also really connected to our neighbors and our friends. And that's the embodied decolonization. We're not outside of the movement. We're struggling to make sense of that. And with that, it has been very much been an inspiration from other Native peoples in many places to think about the way that we can reclaim from institutions such as the imperial government, the United States, reclaim some of our seeds, and then question even some of the ways in which they've been kept and stolen from us. So what you see on the slide right now are two of several varieties of beans that we have rematriated from the USDA, US Department of Agriculture. And these seeds are all listed under, Western scientific names. So, what is this vulgaris? What is this vulgar seed, this common bean? It is translated into English most likely, but these beans and seeds that look so radically different. Beans that are, beautiful, fat and red versus these, rounded golden beans that are a wonder that most of us have never seen before, and we're still searching for their names. Or how did they come to us? And some of that we have found is that it's not enough to circulate seeds within our community. It's to really think about what are the seeds that we're welcoming into our community, and how do we speak to those seeds? What are the names that we use? And so for that, it's very important for us that we find the true names of our seeds, the names that were used by our ancestors, and also feel no need to translate something so beautiful as a hagua, hagua, hagua. This is the name of this fruit, has always been the name of this fruit, will remain the name of this fruit. And that is something for us that is really important, that we're not just learning how to save and move seeds, which is real physical labor, but literally we're trying to embody, practice, and live a tradition, an emergent tradition of rematriation. Sorry, that's me again. So with that, for us, mobile seed libraries are a community solution to disaster. It's really a simple thing to say. And so we would really invite you to put in the chat, if you're able, why are seed libraries important to you and your community? And as Daniela is copying that into the chat, we're going to share a little bit about what seed libraries have been and are for us as a community solution. So what you're seeing on screen right now is this is actually the way in which we like to present and share our seeds within the community. You see that it's an open air environment. I don't know if you can see or hear it, but it's pouring right behind us. So there is a tent over the seeds. We're using traditional vessels. We're using seed envelopes. And for us, what we're trying to do is make our seeds mobile and make our seeds move, but also be mindful that we're the ones doing the physical labor. So what does like cleaning and storage look like when we understand that we're coming to seed work from the standpoint of rematriation and decolonization? So it's not putting them in a seed bank that's far away. It's literally making them as connected to the community as we possibly can. So with that, I'd love to turn this over to Sara to talk a little bit about some of the benefits, emergent strategies and challenges.
Hola.
Hi. We share in the chat the question of why are mobile seed libraries essential? Because really, we believe that this space that's happening right here today, it's particularly for us to be able, us and our communities to access other models and access examples of different practices. As Elena was mentioning in the last slide, that's the table that we have right now, like 30 meters from where we're at, One of the organizers just went back behind us of the Caribbean Herbal Symposium, where we are here and right now. And I want to share just some things that we have seen that have been benefits of managing and maintaining a mobile seed library. And obviously, when you have a mobile seed library, we can include more elderly people. We can include more people that have limited mobility, people that have access to the transportation, that don't necessarily have access to a vehicle, and a lot of people that live in their own barrio, in their own farm, and that not necessarily can get to the urban centers where a lot of the activities happen. We also want a direct connection with farmers and with farms and with people that grow and keep seeds. And instead of thinking that we're going to have a stationary library, we want that the library to travel to these people that already have a lot of work in their day to day, and that is very hard for them to leave everything that they've done to go and visit a seed library. Also, when there's a moment of a disaster like we just mentioned, and I would love to be able to read and share at the end of this session what are different disasters for different communities in the term of the different disasters for us, whether that is because Luma decided not to fix a generator, or because there's a storm coming, or because there has been any other inconvenience. It's very important for us to be able to move those seeds to save their health, and that we can continue no matter what, that we can continue to share the seeds. Um, it also has been very important, not just for us, but for all the people that work with seeds and community resources and share resources, that the seed libraries and the seeds have to be decentralized, that not necessarily to concentrate all of our seeds nor all of our seed libraries in one single place. Puerto Rico, even though it's very small, can take some time getting from one place to the other. And in the same way that we think that food sovereignty in Puerto Rico is going to be through a decentralized model of feeding our communities, the same happens with the seed libraries. How can we then have seeds that are mobile and that can move through all the entities and all the groups and all the farms that work with them? We have, and that is part of a culture, indigenous culture, Taino culture, Boricua culture, of what movement and exchange is. We are here sharing, and yesterday someone shared with us a lot how our indigenous ancestors, the Tainos, were known as navigators, as sailors, as how they love to exchange. And that's something that we also see. Puerto Rico is a space where we are in constant movement, and even is a really hard to stop. But with that same energy and that same culture of what is the exchange, or trueque in Spanish, what is from traveling from one space to the other. We never travel with empty hands. And that is something that has also been very important at the moment of sharing seeds. Having mobile seed libraries had allowed us also to learn in decentralized ways, and to learn from people that don't necessarily come from the way from up down, but they come front to front. They come because we're in their space, because we're supporting their farm, because we're getting to meet each other in person. And so that wisdom, that traditional wisdom, that knowledge, not just about the seeds, but about the recipes, the The planting techniques has been one that has increased while we have been traveling and mobilizing more seeds. Also taking into account that climate change in Puerto Rico impacts different parts. It affects the all, but today it can impact Elena and tomorrow it can impact me in different ways. How can we already have some mobile SIP libraries that can be passed down from guardian to guardian? And for guardian to guardian, it has been also important. Emergent strategies, practical things that we're experimenting with. We are experimenting for, wow, el DEPA this year turns 13. And Elena mentioned we had what we call it in English a CSA. In Spanish, that means community sustain agriculture, where we will share crop boxes every week, and through there we will save seeds of some of the crops. And once we had a commercial kitchen, we will save the seeds from the harvest that we will prepare for the restaurant. And that has been little by little forming in what it is today, community seed library in our space, as in our space in San Salvador. That was a process, and it has been an evolution. I've never thought that 30 years ago that I will be taking part of a seed library. I never thought that I will be visiting farms and stopping my car in any tree by the street constantly, harvesting and saving and sharing and letting go and planting. But a lot has been through the same model of El Departamento de la Comida through the years, specifically after Hurricane Maria, where a lot of us lost access to seeds. And well, even the Departamento de la Comida had to got this challenge, well, that the farmers were who we used to work with before at that moment in a restaurant in San Juan, where the farmers didn't have access to the seed, and that's what pushed my participation, my more active participation, and my more deeper participation to what is like seed strategies. As also another thing that we have been experimenting throughout the years that have been extremely beneficial and that are emergent strategies or experimental strategies, where the community seed exchanges, whether that be in different community markets, whether that be farming markets, whether that be in events like this, where automatically, instead of participating as a teacher or as a speaker, or instead of giving a workshop, that in the last years we have been decided to that we just want to bring and share seeds. And that is a resource that we are guardians of and we help manage, but that it depends of other people as well. So for us, it has been very important to prioritize 6 exchanges in different types of markets and events. And so Elena and I, we collaborate once a month minimum. We meet with each other in person, and whether it be in a farmer's market or in a seed exchange, in any seed exchange, and there two seed libraries unite in one place. Uh, Seed library from Cabo Rojo, from Elena, somos Semillas Antillana, and a library from Caguas, 2 hour and a half distance from apart from each other. It is very important for us to also recognize what what is the participation of our queer community inside of this seed exchange. Elena and I, we collaborate not just on a professional level, but also we've been part of a seed community composed of different people that don't have the same access to some of the resources that some familiar units and heteronormative units have more access to. For us, it has been very important through the seed exchanges to be able to exchange support with other farmers that have their own projects, whether that be agroecological, but that are also part of a queer community. And lastly,
de las semillas, lo que significa realmente poder accesar, rescatar y empoderar, seguir, ¿verdad? Custodiando una cultura que, como bien decía Elena ahorita, ha sido robada en muchas ocasiones, y cómo entonces las semillas, ¿verdad? A través de diferentes estrategias pueden apoyar lo que es un movimiento de descolonización de Borikén. Eso ha sido bien importante.
I'm not hearing the English translation.
Oh, just to check. Que dicen que no escuchan la interpretación en inglés.
Yo tampoco.
How about now? Are we here now?
Sí. Yes.
Okay.
And we apologize.
Así.
Okay, acá. Vale. ¿Se oye la interpretación ahora en inglés? ¿Sí? No.
No.
Are you able to hear the interpretation in English now?
Yes.
Yes. ¿Se oye ahora?
Are you able to hear now?
Quizás.
Yes.
Bello. Gracias.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. I'm going to briefly repeat what I said. For those that don't understand Spanish, I'll be very, very brief. We'll go like 2 minutes back.
Por último, que queremos
Well, lastly, we want to acknowledge the importance of our queer community and seed exchanges, and how we've been able to create our own seed family, where we have various projects that don't have access to funds, to resources, access to support, like many other heteronormative farms or units, a lot of spaces where agriculture and misogyny go hand in hand. Being able to share seeds has given us great support in being able to also connect with other projects within the agroecological queer movement. And lastly, what's the rematriation of seeds, the going back and reclaiming a culture that has been stolen from us and that has been stolen from many people. That's part of the strategy, what drives the emergence strategies that we are putting into practice. And how can seeds contribute and support some movements and some practice of decolonization in Borikén, in a space where all our movements are linked? And decolonization, being able to reappropriate a culture that has been stolen and that has entered our food system in a very aggressive manner in the next years. So my generation at the moment does not have enough knowledge of our endemic and native plants. And part of creating a seed library is being able to share that information. Would you like to say something, or you wanted to say something?
Thank you. First, I want to share that the interpreters just reminded me to speak slowly, and I want to share that publicly because it's something we're all trying to do within the language justice movement, is enable access. And this idea of access for us is so central to the mobility. And I wanted to say that, like, one of the disasters we didn't mention is you know, just the impacts of transphobia and homophobia and misogyny within our communities that has forced many of us to flee. So this idea of mobility at the same time that one is Indigenous, at the same time that one is seeking freedom, but what does freedom look like when we don't know? So part of this emergent strategy for us, part of this emergent strategy for us is to really be aware of what it means to connect. And so I want to share a story that is connected both to the benefits of having a mobile seed library, the emergent strategies, and the challenges. So my dear neighbor, Carmen, she's 87 years old. And she really, when I landed in Borikén, so I fled my community as a survivor of violence, came to Borikén because I felt the call, the connection to the island, that I had to be here doing this work around seeds and trees. And when I met Carmen, she was really the one who taught me the ways of this island and this island seeds and traditions. And I had spent many times in other Indigenous movements and spaces, a decolonization activist for decades, but it was something else to land here and be speaking with an elder who grew up in a house made of yagua. So our mighty palm, she was raised in a house that was not just a home made of a tree, but food from that tree, security from that tree, and all the stories she told me of that tree, the way in which they used to use the seed pods, these giant seed pods, to carry in the harvest, the cosecha. These were stories that just came between us because we spent time together, because she's an elder who lives alone. She has no support. And that really played out severely during the context of the start of the pandemic. So what does it mean to honor the knowledge of somebody like Carmen, recognize her own incredible life history of mobility, but also being forced into one place just by the context of her age, the failing social system that we have here in terms of providing care, the scattering of our families, and then the arrival of somebody like me who, comes, hitting the ground, ready to connect myself with some trees. And really I realized that, our elders are our trees are our ancestors. It's a body question. Another challenge that I want to speak to is the question of mobility around our crops. So like with our elders, our trees don't move. Many of our seeds need to be in the ground. Our viandas, our starchy roots, vegetables, the means of preservation. The means of preservation are different. It's not the same thing as drying them and sticking them in a jar or an envelope. It's really finding a way to transport a living seed within a pack of dirt, be able to put that seed and something just happened. Are you able to hear me? Okay, sorry, I heard a sound. So that's like a question for us around like mobility and placement connection with the seeds themselves. Another thing I want to share is that many of our tropical seeds, they only have a duration of like 2 to 3 months. Can you hear me now? Is this better? Okay. So many of our tropical seeds, they only have like a shelf life of 2 months. So really the tradition is, the tradition that calls to us is to remember seeds belong in the ground. Seeds belong with their caregivers. So like with my elder friend Carmen, what can I do to support her in accessing the foods that she can digest, but also share some of her knowledge that is neglected by the community around her? And that's a real question about hunger
and healing. That is why the mobility of seeds in the context of the library is so essential. And with that, I want to bounce it back to Clara.
Quería también... ¿Me oyen?
Can you hear me?
Tara, we are not hearing you. Oh, okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I just moved so that you don't hear the feedback because I feel that Elena's headphones stopped working. Hemos estado compartiendo.
We've been sharing some of the challenges and strategies and benefits. I know that different people have been sharing through the chat, and I would also like to ask once again, what have been some of the challenges? Elena shared challenges regarding logistics on movement, mobility, not only of people, but also of the seeds, and how some practices are better or worse than others regarding the cleaning and the storing and handling of the seeds, specifically in the case of Puerto Rico. And we are also facing and finding seeds that do not fit inside envelopes. In the case of Puerto Rico, we eat a lot of root vegetables and many different seeds that in themselves can have a very short shelf life. So it's been a challenge for us how we can better store these seeds. Obviously, in our case, we have noticed that the best way to store a seed is planting it, sowing it, sharing it, and doing it all over again. And we have done a lot of work outside of the typical model of a seed library, and we're focusing more on each space and each farm. And also in our case, how can we take care of a grave need? That's hunger. And also, how can we heal in a real way, not in such an utopic or theoretic way? How can we have a seed library that can contribute directly to healing and the health of our communities? And that means carrying out different practices that we have been experimenting with, and a challenge and I've personally faced in El Departamento de la Comida. Specifically, we're working with different farmers, how can we close the gap between the seed libraries and the seed needs that people have, and those that specifically plant seeds for others? I've seen many people who are seed guardians, and I also belong to a huge community of agriculture or farmers, and people, many of them store their own seeds, but I've also seen that there's still a lot of space to be able to connect even more between our seed library and also with other seed libraries or tree seed libraries like Elena's, for example, and also the needs that some farmers have. That's why I also wanted to share
share the question in the chat about where are we headed? Sharing this information about what are good examples, good practices, experiments, the experience of each of you from your front, as we can say, from where are we headed when we're talking about seed libraries? Where are we headed when we're talking about community seeds? Where are we headed, or where do we go from here when we talk about our seed culture? In our case, for example, and Daniela, if you can share in the chat box, I think they already did. What if whatever you can answer about next steps? What do you think? What do you think that's coming into the future? What do you think is going to be important for your community to work on in the future? In the case of Elena and I, for example, we realized that we wanted to share seeds outside of farmer markets, typical farmers market spaces. We wanted to reach other people. Elena shared that photograph of the seeds with the USDA packets. Those seeds don't have common names. Those seeds that come from 8, 10, 20 different varieties have different forms and colors, different flavors, and they also have different stories and they have different names. And these names have been very inaccessible. And so part of our next steps towards the future of where we headed, where we go from here, is to be able to participate in events and spaces that that are not necessarily farmers markets. In the case of Elena, there's a flea market. um, and Elena will be put in their seat table, so they can be able to give access to more people and other people, people that don't go to farmers market, but people that most surely know the names of those beings that we do not their names of. We do not know their names of, and as part of that, it's a part of it's being able to have access to the culture that comes with the seed. So we have decided to open other spaces and to achieve to be able to make the seeds accessible in places that are least thought of. That is something that we're going to be sharing more of this year. In the case of El Depa, for example, we've been participating of our monthly market in Huerto Feliz in Caguas, which is a community garden. And we have had more knowledge exchanges and seed exchanges than in other spaces that have more farmers in them, for example. And that is extremely important. How are seeds part of our popular culture? How everyone can be seed guardians, and um that will depend that will let us know where we're going to be sharing the seeds. Another thing that we have decided upon is especially about the community library, seed library from El Departamento de la Comida, that works with a geographical region and specific with farmers from El Barrio San Salvador and nearby areas. We share more or less the same needs and the same climate changes because we live at a distance of no more than 50 miles. So we have realized that the seed library from the Departamento de la Comida for 2023, we're going to be focusing on and what is less variety of seeds, but focusing on some harvests that are very particular they have a cultural importance for our people from our barrio that go well in our climate and that go well in our soil, with our soil, and that also our own farmers have asked for before. And so we were going to be focusing more on what the different chicken peas varieties, the calabaza, the pumpkins, the different variety of pumpkins, ñame, which is a root vegetable that has so many varieties, and that we know just very few of them. And that is a way for us to deepen more and to do the opposite. The one that does a lot basically cannot do. Mile deep, inch wide will be the translation. And as Elena mentioned before, to experiment with different types of setups, different types of, yeah, how are we sharing the seeds? Are we going to do it with envelopes or in jars? If people can go through the same their own experience of touching the seed, of smelling the seed, of feeling the seed, and they themselves picking them up and put them in the envelopes that take more time sometimes, or whether we're gonna seat ourselves, we're gonna be the ones sitting and doing it, or we're gonna let other people to be able to guard the seed library and the kiosk, so other people can also practice what it means to be a seed guardian. And at in this moment, while we're doing this session, we have 3 colleagues from our Departamento de la Comida outside in our kiosk, in our seed kiosk, going through that experience as we talk. And it has been extremely beneficial as far as as since we began this year, to be able to open the back end, to able to open up to what happens backstage. And what's happening now is in our seed exchange tables, all the little boxes and the envelopes and the magic markers that are necessary for us to be able to set up those spaces, these spaces. And so I leave this now to Elena. I'm going over there with my computer.
Oh, I can.
Sorry.
Um, one thing I want to share is what you're looking at on the screen right now. If you're able to see, is my kitchen. There is a table that serves as the welcoming for spaces, for seeds that I have foraged, seeds that I have gotten when I've been working on local farms. And you will also see, a bookshelf, which is where I keep some of my cleaning tools. This is my kitchen. I have organized my life around the seeds. And because we don't have traditional spaces, or at least in my situation, I grow seeds in on my patios, my front and my back patio. I plant gardens in the community in different places based on what I'm doing. But I'm limited by what I can do because I live in communal housing, public housing where there is not access to land nor growing rights. So my kitchen then is one of the things that I can contribute. So my growing spaces are experimental and they're fun, but they're also really limited. So what I can do, what I can offer, is the transformation of my kitchen and the experimentation with different techniques of drying and storing. And for me, that's a really beautiful way to rematriate. As I'm returning to this island that my ancestors had to leave, as I am coming here to this conference, this gathering as somebody who has roots in many places, but really knows I need to be in this space. What then does it look like? Really, what does it look like to lead the life that is decolonized as a daily practice, that is around rematriation as the living everyday choice? What does that then really mean? For me, it means taking out the traditional equipment we have in a dining area and make it into a workspace. So you will see on the wall, if you're able to see, there is a thermometer. The thermometer is, if you're able to see it, is at 80 degrees. And just given my limitations, not just in the tropics, but the designs of the building in which I live, I have to monitor the temperature all the time. And I've realized I can't ever get below 80 degrees in my home. And there's no way to do that given our energy grid anyway. Our seeds can't take major fluctuations, so they can't go in a refrigerator. Not that, that is dependable given our energy crisis on the island. But then it's also like, really, what are the guidebooks that I've been studying? Are they actually providing me with the information that I need that is appropriate for a tropical environment? So for me, it's experimental. And one thing I'm doing now, in addition to the seed cleaning and the seed storage, is experimenting with germination. Not just germination rates to think about the seed's viability, but literally so that I can bring those to places like Depa, which is in Caguas, 2 hours away from where I live in Cabarojo, which is a coastal community, bringing those seeds there because they will grow more quickly, given where I live, the conditions where I live. But also because that's a lot of what our elders and the young ones need. They actually need to see not just the seeds, but the flowering into life, the whole circle. And that's what we're really trying to visualize. And it's part of what we're trying to visualize also with like sharing a slide like this, which is my personal space, because it isn't my personal space. It's a space where the community is coming together in a way that enriches us. And that may be through the seeds, but the seeds are coming in and going out as plants, as trees, and then also as seeds. And that really is the big next step for me, is thinking about how do I germinate within the limited conditions that I have, using a front and a back patio where I have to contend with, for example, my neighbor's cat who likes to pee on my seed tray. And that's just like a real, challenge within the community. So I wanted to share that bit as we transition into thinking and closing. What is rematriation? What is embodied decolonization? What does it feel like? What does it taste like? But also, what does it ask of us? What is it asking of us to do? If a library isn't accessible in the traditional sense that most people know, what are the ways that we can save seeds, get to know seeds, eat the fruits, and share them? Because that's really the point. It isn't to keep them at all. It's to grow them and to give them and enjoy them.
Gracias a todos.
Thank you everyone. We want to thank those that have participated today. We would like to perhaps hear from anyone who would like to share, be it through the chat. We have 10 minutes left, and I know that Daniela also has some things saved for the end of the session, things to share. But here, through this slide, I'm sharing our information, our contact information. Anything you need, we're here at your service. We are extremely interested in getting to know more people from the Caribbean specifically, and also people from the Boricua diaspora or diaspora. Our library seeds, our seed libraries connect with a lot of other seed libraries, sorry. But we've noticed that we truly want to focus and deepen with other people that are working with the same seeds from the archipelago of Borikén, or with those people that would like to guard seeds from Borikén, even if they're in other parts. And I'm going to leave the space to Daniela so they could share the information for the end of this session. And if we have any extra minutes, if it could be through the chat or you can unmute your mic. I'm going to leave it to Daniela. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tara and Elena, for this wonderful session, and to the interpreters for making it broadly accessible. We really appreciate it, and I think it actually worked, so that's wonderful. So thank you all. I have been posting some links for DEPA and also for organizations and sites and social networks related to the Seed Library Summit in general. And the slide right now is on about a campaign that has been started somewhere here in North America to encourage up to 1 million or more than 1 million people to save seeds. However, that link apparently is not working right now. And so there will be an update available for you if you're interested in that. In addition, I think we need the next slide, please. In addition, the summit has, yes, a survey that we would really appreciate you filling out. There's a different survey, one for each session, to give us feedback so that we can make this an even better conference next year. And if you felt that having interpretation was valuable and important, please note that in the open comment section at the end of the survey, because that's important feedback to have as we prepare for next year as well. And I put the link is there in the chat. The chat will also be available after the session is over, as will the slides and the recording. So those will be available for a couple of weeks for all of the participants, and we won't be sending out, but Eventbrite will be sending out a link for accessing those. Is there another slide? I'm trying to remember now. Oh yeah, and finally about access to a special extended streaming period for a documentary about the life of Dr. Vandana Shiva. And I will put that link also into the chat here. That is not free, that there is a $10 fee for that. So that's available. I think that's good for our housekeeping. Please put in the chat if there's a particular link you're looking for, but otherwise I'll let Tara and Elena take questions or do whatever for the last. We have 8 more minutes.
Gracias. Cualquier pregunta la pueden compartir.
Thank you. Any questions you have, you could share them through the chat. I am sharing my screen, but I'm able to see. If anybody has any questions, comments, and like Elena shared, and I'll say that in Spanish as well, any suggestions on how we can best share this information for the future. This is the first time that we have simultaneous interpretation in this conference. And it's the first time that we have a virtual presentation of our nature of in-person seed exchange. So anything that you would like to share? If not, I'm going to leave it open and give Elena the opportunity.
Thank you for everyone for being here. We extend a special thank you to Daniela and to Yaya for translation, as well as Anais. One thing I saw in the chat that I wanted to comment on about mobility, somebody mentioned the bicycle. Using that as a means of transport. For the first 4 years that I was living on Borikén, which is pretty much all that mountains and beaches with a lot of potholes in between them, is I spent the first 4 years here doing everything on a bicycle. And so as I've been building out my mobile seed library, started in a small container like this, and now I have it in a box. And the reason it's in a box is because I want to be able to walk places, specifically in my community. So yes, to go to the flea market, I will need to use a car because it will require, like a table and a tent, to protect the seeds from the sun and also enable people to spend time looking at the seeds. The mobility is really essential for all of it. And I really encourage people to look at the bicycle as a great option because it actually redirects your energy. It's just like transforming my kitchen into a space of seed discovery, seed preservation, seed circulation and growth. It's an experiment. It's a practice in motion.
And that's it, y'all. I'm on the English channel now.
Y eso
and
es
we
todo.
have to head back
Estoy en el canal de inglés
to
ahora y
our
I'm sorry.
seed table.
Thank you for everyone. joining
Thank
us.
you. Have a beautiful day.
Adios.
Thank you. And thank you, Yaya and Anais, for your
Thank you, Daniela.
Thank you. Great to work with you. Bye. It worked well. Yay.